Can you imagine that watching porn is actually illegal in China? In the US, people might be at a party and someone casually mentions their latest hookup, and no one even blinks. But in China, that would never happen. So why do Americans and Chinese seem to have such different attitudes toward sex? But here's the question. Are Chinese people really as conservative about sex as we often think? Do the attitudes align with the stereotypes we see in the media? Curious about the differences in sexual attitudes between China and the US? Well, stick around, because by the end of this video, you'll have the answers. Today, we're diving into one of the most fascinating cultural differences between the US and China: attitudes toward sex. Now, let's talk about something really interesting: open discussions about sex. In the US, sexual topics are often openly discussed, from casual conversations at the dinner table to educational shows and talk radio. When was the last time you heard someone in America awkwardly avoid talking about sex? It's pretty rare, right? But in China, it's a different story. Openly discussing sexual preferences, desires, or experiences is still seen as taboo in many circles. Sure, there's been a shift, especially among younger generations who are more influenced by global media, but culturally, conversations about sex are often considered inappropriate in public settings. This stems from traditional values that prioritize modesty and restraint. Let's talk about premarital sex. In the US, it's become pretty standard. The majority of Americans, especially in younger generations, engage in premarital sex, and it's often seen as a natural part of growing up. In fact, nearly 90% of Americans have had sex before marriage. Some religious groups might still frown upon it, but overall, premarital sex is normalized. But here's something you might find surprising. In American dating culture, the path to becoming a couple isn't always straightforward. Before officially becoming boyfriend and girlfriend, many Americans go through various stages like just friends, talking, and seeing each other. Some even engage in casual dating or open relationships during this period. It's not uncommon for individuals to have sexual relationships with others during this time, even before becoming exclusive. In contrast, China's attitude toward premarital sex is more complex. While it's not unheard of, premarital sex is still surrounded by cultural stigma. Traditional views often emphasize that sex should happen within the context of a marriage. Family expectations play a huge role in this. Many Chinese parents still hold the belief that their children should remain sexually chaste until marriage. However, attitudes are slowly shifting, particularly among the younger generation in major cities. Still, many Chinese individuals may feel pressure to hide premarital sexual experiences due to fear of judgment or disapproval. In the US, sex education is relatively comprehensive. It covers everything from biological aspects, like reproduction and sexually transmitted diseases, to emotional intimacy, contraception, and even consent. Most schools provide a broad curriculum, and parents are encouraged to talk openly with their children about sex and relationships. Additionally, LGBTQ+ issues are increasingly included in sex education programs. Discussions around sexual orientation and gender identity are now common in many US schools, helping students understand and respect diversity in sexual preferences. In contrast, sex education in China tends to focus mostly on the biological aspects of sex, like puberty, reproduction, and sexually transmitted diseases. There is little to no discussion about emotional intimacy, consent, or sexual identity. This basic approach leaves many students with limited knowledge about healthy sexual relationships. Even when it comes to LGBTQ+ issues, there's a significant lack of education. Homosexuality was decriminalized in China in 1997, but public discourse surrounding LGBTQ+ topics is still limited and often taboo. In fact, same-sex relationships are rarely included in school curriculums, and many students grow up with little understanding or acceptance of LGBTQ+ issues. Public acceptance of LGBTQ+ people is slowly improving, especially in major cities, but societal stigma is still widespread, particularly in more rural areas. Many Chinese LGBTQ+ individuals still face discrimination, and for many, coming out remains a difficult and risky process due to family and societal pressure. Let's dive into something most people are familiar with: but rarely discuss openly. Pornography. In the US, the porn industry is a massive business, widely accessible, normalized, and in many cases, even used as a form of sexual exploration. Whether it's through online platforms, movies, or even social media, porn is readily available, and its consumption is viewed with a certain level of detachment, almost as if it's just another form of entertainment. In China, however, things are a bit different. While there is certainly an underground demand for pornography, it is illegal and highly regulated. Pornography is censored by the government, and the very existence of such material is heavily controlled. Culturally, sex is seen as private and intimate, not something to be broadcast or commercialized. As a result, even though people in China consume porn in private, they generally avoid discussing it publicly, and doing so could be seen as taboo or even shameful. So, are Chinese people truly as conservative as often portrayed? I wouldn't be so sure. Did you know that in ancient China, many attitudes toward sex were actually quite open? Some even more so than in today's US. For example, during the Tang Dynasty, 618 to 907 AD, there were widespread depictions of sexual freedom in art and literature. In fact, the Tang Dynasty is often seen as a period of cultural and sexual openness. The famous poet Li Bai wrote about love and sensuality without the constraints we might expect in more conservative times. Even more surprisingly, same-sex relationships were recognized and not taboo during this period. In the Han Dynasty, 206 BC, 220 AD, Emperor Ai's relationship with his male companion Dongxian was celebrated, and the term cut sleeve was coined after Emperor Ai cut off his sleeve to avoid disturbing his lover while he slept. Such examples from hundreds of years ago might surprise you, considering how reserved China is often portrayed today. If you're curious to learn more about these fascinating stories of sexual attitudes in ancient China, let me know in the comments, and I can make a separate video to dive deeper into this. But back to the point. The reason Chinese people might seem more conservative today is because in ancient times, information didn't flow as freely. Now, with the rapid spread of modern information, society isn't quite ready to fully embrace it publicly just yet. It will take some time for people to adjust and open up. Well, that's not entirely true. Yes, Chinese society tends to value privacy and sexual matters, but that's not the same as being repressed. In reality, Chinese attitudes toward sex are evolving fast, particularly among the younger generation. Cities like Beijing, Shanghai, and Guangzhou are hubs for progressive ideas about relationships and sexuality, with rising support for LGBTQ+ rights and increasing discussions around sexual health. So, if you thought Chinese people were hiding in the shadows when it comes to sex, think again. There's a quiet revolution happening underneath the surface, one that balances tradition with a modern, open-minded approach to relationships. Today, we've explored the differences between China and the US in terms of attitudes toward openly discussing sex, views on premarital sex, the content of sex education, and public perceptions of the porn industry. By comparing these cultural aspects, we've challenged some common stereotypes and revealed that Chinese people may not be as conservative as many think. If you'd like to learn more about the cultural differences between China and the US, please like and follow me. Thank you for watching.